It's the Tech Ed Podcast. I am Matt Kirkner, and we are live streaming from Automate Intimate workshops with industry giants, news-making keynotes, networking events, innovation competitions. No event offers more automation, education, or inspiration than does Automate, and we are in the FANUC Education Pavilion. So FANUC automation helps shops large to small improve productivity, increase quality, maximize profits, and maintain a competitive edge. Speaking of maintaining a competitive edge, one of the things that allows our students to maintain a competitive edge in this competitive world of automation opportunities are third-party certifications from organizations like Nocti. We have the Vice President of Nocti Business Solutions, Ann Gielczyk, with us on the Tech Ed Podcast. And you're a great friend. You're known you a long time. You're doing amazing work. Thanks so much for being on with us.
Thanks, Matt, for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to have a great conversation. You're doing so many innovative things and inspiring the next generation of STEM and workforce talent toward these amazing careers we're seeing at Automate. I mean, you walk around here and see this technology, and it's not just robots, and there's tons of robots. There's collaborative robots, there's Delta robots, there's six-axis robots. But then you get out and you see all the different sensors. You see all the AI and machine learning applications that we see here at Automate. We've got all kinds of conveyors and material handling solutions and autonomous mobile robots. And it's really, every time I come to this show, it just absolutely blows my mind. And
Me
so
too.
It's really,
Absolutely.
really exciting.
Yeah.
So, and you're seeing a ton of interesting things here. I know you were in Japan last week. Maybe we'll get into that a little bit as we have the conversation. But for starters, let's just talk about credentials and certifications. They're super popular in technical education today. Lots and lots of them, right? And so differentiation is really, really important. So tell us about Nocti's work in this space, and particularly what makes your credentials unique and valued by employers.
Sure. So we do a couple different types of credentials. Our student testing side of the house, which is Nocti, does end-of-program credentialing for anything that a student would go to a career tech ed center for. Okay. So that could be cosmetology, culinary, automotive, anything that a student needs to get a credential for. They usually go through a 2-year technical program, and then they can take one of our credentials to get a workforce competency credential. They can also potentially get college credit for it. So, we've always had a CLEP test for math and English, but we've never really had a technical CLEP test. So we're really trying to fill that space for students that want to go to 2-year technical schools. The other big piece of what we do is industry certification. So we work with industry organizations like FANUC. We also work with MSSC, the Manufacturing Skill Standards Council.
Sure.
To get students national certifications. So what's really important about a national certification is that, we go in and we require that both industry and education sit at the table. We really think that that's an important piece, that industry and education are talking to one another. So it's not just what the school wants to teach and what they've always taught, but it's what does industry in their community really need? What kind of technicians do they need? And so we work with that entire group to build the set of standards. And then we take that set of standards and we develop the industry recognized certification test, and we turn those standards over to a different organization. So it could be a curriculum vendor, a training provider, or in FANUC's case, they develop their own curriculum and training. But that's really important that you keep that firewall between who's developing your training and curriculum and another organization developing your test.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it really does maintain that level of authenticity in terms of what you're determining is the competency that's important to industry. And I've often commented when I was in manufacturing, which I was for 20 plus years before coming over to education now a number of years ago, I had no idea what a third-party credential was. And then I get over to the world of education, and they're like, somebody counted them up, there's like 900 to 1,000 different third-party credentials available just in education. And it was a little bit for me, how can this be of value if I, as an industry employer, didn't even know what these were? And I think the important work of Nocti and partnering with companies like FANUC, and then going out to all these other industrial employers and saying, when you're hiring this talent, what is it that you're hiring for? And bringing the educators to the table and making sure that dialogue is there. That really is a differentiator in your organization. Am I getting that right?
Yes, I think that's probably the biggest differentiator between us and some other organizations that are developing, certifications or credentials or micro credentials. It's really important for the industry to see this is a FANUC certification. Nocti is not a certifying organization. FANUC is the certifying body. What we bring to the table is the third party that says, this credential is valid, this certification is valid. So we talk a lot about self-credentialing. Organizations like FANUC don't want to self-credential. They don't want to give somebody a piece of paper and say, thanks for coming to our training class.
Sure.
You've finished.
Yeah, for our audience, tell us what a self-credential is.
So a self-credential is really, that would be FANUC having an individual go through a training program and giving them a certificate of completion. So there's nothing really at the end to determine what they've learned, how much they've learned, what they've retained. It's really, thanks for coming. You've gone to this training class, and here's your certificate.
Got it.
So what we bring to that is the third party that says we have gone through a regimented process, an entire validation process to determine what someone needs to know to be safe and successful in their job.
Right.
And we've also set a legally defensible passing score. So they have to meet a specific benchmark that's been determined by industry in order to pass and receive that certification.
I spent as I mentioned, my entire career up until, a few years ago in manufacturing. All of our manufacturing operations were ISO registered, ISO certified to a specific standard. And it's almost, there's the same types of standards in your world, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So we follow the ISO 17024 standard. And what that standard says is that we are accredited to certify people. So our process has been accredited, not a specific test, but our process of developing the certification test to certify a person or an individual is accredited.
Got it. So we're sitting here in the FANUC Education Pavilion, and it's just incredible watching people go back and forth, seeing not just incredible manufacturing technologies and really cool applications, but amazing ways to inspire the next generation toward careers in advanced manufacturing, give them the competencies and the skills necessary to be successful when they get there. I know that's a huge drive behind your partnership with FANUC. Tell us specifically about how the arrangement with FANUC works.
Sure. So as I mentioned before, we came in to help. FANUC has always had their own training programs. They've developed their own standards, and they developed their curriculum and their training based off of that. So it was almost 10 years ago now that they wanted a third-party certifier to come in. And so we came in and we redeveloped those standards because we wanted their training department to make sure that they really were training what industry wants.
Right.
And so, and then they took those standards and tweaked their curriculum, and we continued on with the testing. So throughout the years, we started out with the robot operator certification. So we have levels 1 and level 2. Level 1 for robot operator is a multiple choice test.
Okay.
Level 2 is a hands-on practical assessment. And, we've done that for technician as well. For our own credentials, we also have a written and a performance test. And I think that's really important because some people just aren't good test takers.
Right.
So it's really important. I always use the example, I would rather a student show me how they can fix my brakes than to tell me they can fix my brakes.
Yeah.
So we've, kind of continued on with that same, that same path with FANUC. We are going to be starting to develop a CNC certification here pretty soon with FANUC.
Awesome.
So we're moving on to that.
That'll be big
The
news.
collaborative robot, we're working on that one. So we just keep continuing on with FANUC. We've had a great partnership with them so that they really have a whole catalog of certifications that goes along with every part of their training.
Absolutely. And just to kind of give an example for our audience of how important and how prominent this partnership is, FANUC invites a very limited number of people every year to what they call their private show in Japan to see the latest and greatest of automation technology as it emerges on the marketplace. And I know you were privileged to take part in that last week. So probably still a little bit of jet lag, maybe.
Just a little bit.
It takes a little bit to get back. And I can actually remember, the hardest part for me on those trips was always like 3 a.m. Wisconsin time, when you're like sitting down for a late afternoon dinner, and I'm just like, kids, let me go to sleep. And but just an incredible experience. Tell us a little bit about the time that you had there.
I said to somebody this week, I feel like I keep looking at my watch, wondering what time it is at home.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
I'm home.
Yeah.
So it's incredible. It's I felt very honored and privileged to be asked to go along with this group. So FANUC usually takes some of their customers over, and it really is interesting for them and really anyone to see really the breadth of what FANUC is. I mean, their global operations, their global headquarters is at the base of Mount Fuji.
Mm-hmm.
So you take a bus from Tokyo and
Yep.
you get to go out to the mountain and see it all. And it was really interesting to me because I work in a completely different world. So it was interesting to me to watch their customers who work with these operations every day
Yep.
and kind of their awe of
Mm-hmm.
what there is. But it was also very interesting to me because the private show doesn't just include North America. FANUC Shanghai people were there, people from FANUC Europe were there. So just the vastness of what FANUC has to offer globally is really impressive, and it was really great to see.
That's awesome. Yeah, just to put that into perspective, 21, I think it was like 21 million square feet of buildings that they
Yes.
have on that campus. And just some of the things that stick out to me. Number one, you can't see one building. There's like, I forget how many buildings, 30 buildings or something on the campus, and you can't see one building from the next. So they kept the forest there, and you're
Yes.
on the bus, and all of a sudden you kind of drive out of the forest in front of this, 300,000 square foot manufacturing building. That was always really fascinating.
Mhm.
Did you get to see robots making robots? Did
Yes.
you see that? Isn't that
Yes,
incredible?
it's incredible. Yeah.
And in fact, I was with one of the gentlemen from FANUC about, I think my first time there was probably 7 years ago, and he was like, I don't know if that's really cool or really scary, just watching a robot make
Right?
another robot, but
Yeah.
that was really really amazing. And then and then just watching, I think to your point, I remember riding the bus because it's about a 2-hour bus ride if I
Mhm.
recall from Tokyo out to the campus, and just listening to the conversations going on in that bus about industrial automation. And I joke that the young people were talking about automation solutions the same way that the young people in my generation talked about how cool their cars were, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh,
True.
that's just an amazing sensor. Look at how
Yes.
cool that robot is. So it's just a great trip, and incredibly clean, and the people there are so friendly, and I'm really really glad you had that
Yeah,
opportunity.
and going back to robots making robots, the fact that that's where all robots, I mean, that's where all FANUC robots are made. They
Right.
don't have, they don't have a plant in the United States. Now, I do believe that in Rochester Hills, they make the robots that do
Yep, they make
painting.
their paint robots
They make
there,
their
yep.
paint robots, but
Yep.
every other automated manufacturing robot is made in that facility and shipped all over the world.
Yep.
It's really just an amazing thing to even think about.
Totally. And then I guess maybe I shouldn't assume, but the tour that I was on, we went into their warehouse where they store all the legacy
Mhm.
products, and they can fix a CNC control from 1961 or
Yes.
whatever. They've got all of that product there. If somebody obsoletes a component, they buy all the inventory because they'll never let a customer go without a
Yes.
product.
I
And
thought that was very interesting. They guarantee their robots for life, which, I'm like, especially in education, it's really good to update your technology, but FANUC will support it for as long as you have that robot.
yeah,
So
exactly. Mean time to failure, 52 years for a FANUC CNC
Yeah.
control, believe it or not.
Isn't that
So,
something?
Yeah, 52 years. So literally a couple generations
Yeah.
of manufacturing talent, which is
Mhm.
which is absolutely crazy. So let's get back on the topic of certifications. I know you mentioned, teased a little bit the new CRX certification. Tell us
Mhm.
about that. The FANUC CRX, of course, being the FANUC collaborative robot or family of collaborative robots, and tell us about that certification.
So we're still in the piloting phase. So if there's anybody listening that has an education program of students who are learning on the collaborative robot, we would love to have them pilot test that. We're hoping for that to be available later this summer or
Okay.
early in the fall. But it will be the one and only certification on a collaborative robot of its kind.
Awesome.
There's no other certification out there for a collaborative robot. And I think that that's really where, that's kind of where the education is going, is
Sure.
into those collaborative robots.
Right.
So this will be really important.
Absolutely, yeah. Education should certainly follow or walk alongside their industrial partners as new
Mhm.
technologies are emerging. And what I love about the FANUC collaborative robots, and there's a lot of different collaborative robots on the market, but they've got the collaborative nature of the robot, but they also have the precision and payload capacity that a lot of the other ones don't, and so they haven't gotten away from that just incredible relationship with their customers, where if you buy a FANUC robot, it's still going to have the ability to carry large payloads, and it's going to be able to be operated and programmed with a precision that meets the needs of manufacturing and industry. And we are seeing a lot of schools that are adopting collaborative robotics, and
Yeah.
the ones that are forward thinking. Maybe I'm a little bit biased. Are adopting the FANUC platform for those reasons. We want the
Mhm.
students learning on the technology that they're going to see when they get to industry,
Yes.
and that's exactly what's happening. So I imagine these work groups that are coming up with the standard are industrial employers that are already utilizing and applying
Yes.
collaborative robots. Anything you can tell us about what you're hearing from them, or is it still too early in the process?
I think it's a little bit too early. I should also, full disclosure, I don't develop the tests.
Right.
So I'm not in those meetings.
Yep.
So my psychometrician would be a better person to
Okay, fair enough.
ask
Yeah.
about those things.
Got it.
But and the people from FANUC, of course, are super supportive of it. So John Potter is a great person to, get a little bit more information about what that's going to cover.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah, we can certainly talk to John. So on the piloting, and you suggested if schools are interested in being involved, what does that process look like and feel like for them, and then how do they get connected?
Sure. So I think that you'll all have my contact information, so they can just send me an email, and then I will help their school. If their school isn't already an Nocti testing site, we're finding that a lot of CTE programs that are bringing in robotics already have other CTE programs.
Sure.
So they're probably already an Nocti testing site. So
Yep.
it's very simple to just order the pilot testing, and then you proctor your students, and then we get all of the data. FANUC is going to, once the entire validation process is complete, we are going to do a rescore. So your students will get that certification if they meet the passing score. So
Awesome.
we just have to do a few things, always with a test. The reason that we pilot is because sometimes a question might be worded that might be confusing. So that's what we're getting out of the pilot testing, is all of that data. And so if there is a question that we feel that everybody should get credit for, we need to make those adjustments before we give anybody a score.
Absolutely.
And so we do what we call a rescore, and then we give the certifications off based on their rescore.
Well, and as I've learned more and more about certifications over the course of the last several years, it's been fascinating the amount of science that goes into this kind of work, right? It's not just as simple as saying, "Hey, what are we hiring for? Let's make a test. Let's test the students and see if they pass." You're doing all of this research on the questions that you're asking of, do they get to the critical nature of the skill or the competency that we're trying to identify, making sure that there isn't implicit bias in the questions, which I understand. Maybe you could go into that for a minute, making sure that we're not asking a question in a way that would marginalize a certain group of people. Tell me about that.
We do that, yeah. So we do what we call an item analysis and a bias review. And so we ask some demographic questions so that we know who's taking the test. Once in a while, it's a regional thing. For example, we had a question on our on a culinary test, and it asked a question about strawberries or what the growing season is for strawberries. Well, in California, it's far different than it is in Michigan for the growing season.
Right.
So we really had to, go back through and tweak those questions. And so we do that. We just want to make sure that there isn't any particular population that wouldn't be able to answer a question, based on whatever their demographic is.
Absolutely, yeah. And employers can take comfort then too that if they are hiring an individual with that certification and expecting to have those competencies, that they know the questions that they were asked and the assessments they were given drive to what that competency is, which is really the value of a third-party credential.
It is, yeah. We our tests are all content valid. So basically what that's saying is, no matter who you are, you need to know this content to be able to do the job. And so, it's really content driven. And so, yes, we can say that somebody who gets that certification has all the content knowledge that they need to be successful.
Yeah, and in a time, rightly so, where diversity is such an important focus of so many businesses, it really levels the playing field in a lot of ways
Absolutely.
for everyone. And if they've gotten through the assessment, if they've earned the credential, that they have those competencies,
Yes.
and regardless of who they are, where they came from, or for that matter, how they learned them, really
Yes.
important.
Mhm.
So you also teased the CNC credential here on the Tech Ed
Yeah.
podcast. Tell us about that.
So I actually am working with a community college in the state of Virginia, and they wanted to develop a CNC credential. There is some grant funding in the state of Virginia called Fast Forward funding, where if you have an industry recognized, nationally certified credential at the end, then the student's tuition is 2/3 paid for.
Okay.
And so I said, let's get let's get FANUC involved,
Right.
because they have been wanting to do a CNC certification, and this is perfect. So now we're broadening that. It's not just going to be subject matter experts from Virginia. We're going to have subject matter experts from other states, so that we can really call it a national certification.
Sure.
And so I think it'll be very exciting to add that to FANUC's battery of certifications.
Totally exciting. And you think about, I think a lot of our listeners recognize, but maybe not all of them, FANUC is by far the largest CNC manufacturer in the world. They've been doing it longer. They invented the CNC control. In fact, the name FANUC is Factory Automation Numerical Control. A lot of people don't realize that.
Right.
And so it's at the fundamental, um, basically the genesis of their entire company and their entire technology. I think like 2/3 of the FANUC CNC controls that are used on machine tools are FANUC, and it's not just, we think about like a robo drill or a robo shot or a FANUC CNC controlled machine tool that is made by FANUC, but even bigger than that are all the other machine tools that integrate that FANUC control. The truth of the matter is, when a student leaves their education pathway and goes into industry, the control that they are most likely to be working on is a FANUC, hands down, almost no doubt. And yet, when we're spending time in education, you see a lot of different machine tools and you see a lot of different controls. And I think we're starting to have educators that are waking up to the idea that, yes, it's important to have these students working on the same technology that they're going to see when they get to industry. That is why we want to make sure that we're at least representing the FANUC CNC solutions in their high schools, in their career centers, in their technical colleges, even in their universities, so they have a familiarization with that control. And to be able to create a third-party credential around the FANUC CNC solution, I mean, that's a really potentially groundbreaking solution.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, they're leading in robotics in education. Their technology leads in education on the CNC side, but the proliferation of the product, we still have a ways to go.
Yeah, and I think that that's just the natural next step for FANUC
exactly.
is to, continue on developing certifications in all of these areas for students. And like you said, they really go CNC and robotics goes hand in hand. So if a student can come out of their education program with both, what a win for them.
Totally. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we think about where CNC is going, and I sit on a number of advisory committees and boards for technical and community colleges, and we have these employers that complain that they can't find people, and then I walk into their manufacturing operation and they've got a skilled machinist that's performing machine tending, and it's like, you could have a robot doing that. Why why do you have, if you can't find enough people to program and maintain and set up your CNC machines, why do you have somebody that's just putting material in it? It doesn't make any sense. So being able to expand into the whole idea of robotic and automatic machine tending, that's a huge growth opportunity. Putting those two things together, really a natural and synergistic approach that Nocti's going about, and we're really, really excited for that to come. So you sat on a panel this morning. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that here at Automate.
It was really exciting. It was an all-female panel, which women in manufacturing is such a hot topic right now. So what I think was most exciting was we had a very young female that is a senior engineer for FANUC talk about her her career pathway and how that all happened for her. And then we had a high school student who's graduating this year in a robotics and automation program. So to hear her experiences and, one of the things she said was they've had tons of young students coming through this year, 8th graders, to look at the program. It's a relatively new program, just a few years old, but she's really gotten so much out of it. Now she's going to go to Oakland University to become a mechanical engineer. So
awesome.
It's great to see, these young females coming through, young people in general, but, especially it's funny, you look around at Automate and I would say probably 75% of the people here are male. So it's always,
exactly.
It really is still very male dominated.
Right. When the line forms in front of the men's bathroom instead of the women's bathroom, that you're in a male dominated environment. Right. And that's what happens here at Automate. And I agree with you. So many great opportunities for girls, aspiring engineers, robot programmers, people working in and around advanced manufacturing. In another life, we have another company that does quite a bit of work in the automation space, and our technical team is all male, and we have our first female intern joining us this summer.
That's great.
And she's actually a student in the automation program at one of our local community colleges. So a student that's on the same kind of a path. And as you know, my wife Renee's a biomedical engineer, obviously has a STEM background and a huge passion toward women in manufacturing. Our lovely producer, Melissa Martin, who's sitting here making sure that everything runs perfect, is another huge advocate for women in manufacturing. So that's just awesome. Tell me about the reaction of the audience that was sitting in that room.
Everybody is, this whole community, it's really quite a small community. And everybody was, really interested. There were a lot of questions about underserved populations. So I think that that's another area that we really need to do a deep dive in and how that can work. I think regionally too, or geographically, I feel like we aren't good yet at getting information out to kids who are in areas that geographically don't necessarily have a lot of manufacturing, but it doesn't mean that they can't be great in advanced automation and engineering. And so we talked a lot about that, and we had a lot of really great questions from the audience about what everyone's doing in those areas as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm sure that it was invigorating for that group of people to see, and maybe a lot of them don't realize that this huge absence of women in many advanced manufacturing positions and just great opportunities for them. I mean, they're great paying roles. There's a wide variety of roles, everything from business development to marketing to event planning to robot programming to engineering and working for some of these integrators that are integrating these technologies and so on. So the future is very, very bright for any young woman or a woman of any age interested in getting into the world of manufacturing.
Yes.
So that's a trend that we hope to see in the future. And I think we're already starting to see. Are there other trends, Ann, that you see from your vantage point, either in automation or the world of credentialing, that our audience should know about?
I think that we're getting a lot better at training. I think we're getting a lot better at understanding that, people may apply for jobs that don't have all the technical skills that they need. And so, and we need to train them, and we need to show their value. We need to, help them understand that they are valued. And that's why people turn over so fast in these manufacturing areas, because they don't feel valued.
Right.
And I think we're getting better at that. I think, that's what we do in our pre-employment testing, is that we give a score report and we give the employer a percentage correct in each of the duty areas, so that they can look at that and say, okay, this person has what I need in these two areas, but they really need some training in these areas. So they don't have everything that I need right now, but I'm going to train them. I'm going to hire them, and I'm going to train them. It's the only way that we are going to get past the skills gap that we have. We have to give people opportunities that haven't had outside opportunities to be trained. We have to do that within organizations and within industry. And I think we're getting better at it. There's still some work to do, but that's really the trend that I have been seeing over the past few years, is that more and more private industry wants to train people.
Absolutely.
They want to upskill them, and they need to, because they need to take the workforce that they have right now and they need to advance them.
Absolutely.
It's the only way we're going to get there.
Yeah, I know. I totally agree with you. And I think it's the biggest thing. If you look at back in, the 1990s, when we had ISO and manufacturing and standardized quality, and that was a huge trend, and the companies either did it or they didn't. And if you did, all of a sudden you drove all this waste out of your process. You were doing what you said and saying what you did, and certifying and validating that you were actually doing those things, and then you could go to your customers and say, look, I'm ISO. And the companies that did that gapped everybody else, right? I mean, it's just created a huge separation. Then 15 years ago, give or take, we had Kaizen, continuous improvement. Same thing. We're driving bottlenecks and constraints out of manufacturing processes, increasing yield, improving throughput, driving down costs. And the companies that did that ended up way ahead. And if they missed it, then they fell behind. I would argue if you miss both of those, standardized quality and continuous improvement, you're probably not even around.
Sure.
And I agree 100% on this next trend, which is the companies that figure out how to train and upskill their incumbent workforce are the ones that are going to gap everybody else for all the reasons you mentioned. You're not going to be able to find enough people. We've got to upskill individuals into positions of greater responsibility. The closer you get to the automation, the better the job pays, the safer it is, the more interesting it is. Why wouldn't we be doing this? And I think that's a huge effort and a huge trend. One final question for Ann Gielczyk as we're spending our time here at Automate, and it's a question we love to ask every single guest here on the Tech Ed Podcast, Ann. And I want you to go back in time and think about yourself as a 15-year-old, maybe that sophomore in high school. And if you could go back in time and give that individual one little piece of advice, what would you tell the 15-year-old Ann?
I would tell myself to do everything you can to stay out of college loan debt.
Wow. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
I mean, really. And I think that, back when I was in high school, we didn't know what we didn't know. There wasn't enough career pathway opportunity and understanding that there were more things that we could do besides just go get a 4-year degree. Right. And what does that look like? And I think we're doing a better job of that now. But, everybody talks about it. College loan debt is a real thing. And I didn't understand that, and the fact that there were lots of other opportunities that I could have had where I didn't necessarily have to go get a 4-year degree.
Right.
The work that I'm doing now, I do need a 4-year
Sure.
degree.
Yeah, it turned out okay.
But yeah, it turned out okay.
Right.
But for young people now, I would say really explore all of your opportunities and what you really think you're going to be happy doing, because there's a good possibility that you don't have to go get a 4-year degree to do that.
Absolutely. No, and so many different, they're all ands, not ors, right? I mean, you can go direct to workforce and find an employer that'll pay you to continue your education if you want to. You can take some time off, or to your point, not necessarily going and borrowing all that money to generate it, to earn a degree that may or may not have a job waiting for you on the other end of that degree. And certainly that path for certain people, and I joke often, I don't want the doctor who's doing surgery on me to be the one that didn't go and get their medical degree, obviously. So for certain endeavors, we need to do that, but there's so many great opportunities available to people. And I think public perception and some of these ideas that we have about 4-year education are starting to morph a little bit, and people are recognizing that, yeah, if you went and went through that route and earned your degree and went through commencement and whatever, awesome. I mean, you should be proud of that. That's an accomplishment, but it's not the only route that you need to take. And certainly technical community colleges, direct to workforce, certifications in high school that lead to amazing jobs as soon as a student graduates and goes into the workforce, all these options. And I think that advice that you would give to your 15-year-old self is great advice for any 15-year-old. This whole wide range of things that you could be doing with the rest of your life. Don't put yourself in a specific lane just yet. And stay open to the fact that you don't have to borrow, $100,000 to have a job.
And other pathways as well. I mean, if you want to be an engineer, look at all the different pathways that you can get there. You could go to a community college for an advanced automation associate's degree, and then somebody else is going to pay for you to become an engineer.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to get a job, and then somebody else will pay that tuition
military
for you.
And GI Bill. I mean, there's just all these opportunities, and that's exactly right. We talk in business all the time about creating wealth with other people's money. And that's you want to leverage a business up and be able to generate wealth that way. You can generate a wealth of future as well by using other people's money. In other words, educating yourself, using your employer's investment in your future, and all these other options. So it's absolutely amazing the opportunities that are available to our young people. We're doing as good a job as we can. We can always do more of making them aware of those conversations and the great work that you are doing with Nocti and with educators and great companies like FANUC all over the United States is making a huge difference. So thank you for that important work, and thanks also, Ann, for joining us on the Tech Ed
Yes, thank
podcast.
you for having me.